and they had to reorganize, that type of thing. What we needed to, can you imagine if you would have had a GM employees, rank employees that actually do the work, and injecting into management saying, we need to build a better car, we need to do this, and listening to them where they could cut and maybe make a line more efficient or something like that, because they know their jobs are at stake. I mean, they saw this decline happening, but they never had a voice there. And so I think if you invest not only people's time, but their heart and their passion into these companies, they're not going to let them go under. They're going to give you the best product because they feel like it's something that they're connected with. And you just see that everywhere where there's more employee input. People want to do the right thing. Workers want to give you, an honest day's work for honest day's pay. And it sounds a little cliche-ish, but it's true. I mean, when you invest, get them to invest into the company, they don't want to see it fail.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, your ideas on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, my first thought when you start comparing the United States to Europe, my first thought is, of course, there's historical contingencies that you have to consider. Mm-hmm. I mean, the United States historically has not had a strong labor tradition. I mean, unionization has been low in the industrialized world, and conversely, we've had the highest instances of labor violence. So on the one hand, you have the smallest labor tradition and the most industrial violence, and so I mean, just even trying to emulate anything like is in Europe is just, quite frankly, it's not going to happen. And I mean, there's a number of instances during the Great Depression and the early post-war period where unions had a lot more power than they do now. But since the 1970s, the union tradition, whatever union tradition that we still have, has been completely emasculated.
I think though that. Not that I'm going to take exception to what you said. I totally agree with where you're coming from, but I do think that there could be a sea change. With you see a lot of high-tech workers that didn't think they needed any representation, and then when they're their jobs are going overseas. Matter of fact, they're going overseas with their jobs to train their counterpart. Maybe it's China, maybe it's India, Malaysia, somewhere like that. That if they would have had a say in the company, in the terms of something as large as the company's power, to have collective bargaining and that type of thing, maybe they could have headed some of this off.
Right. Well, and that's actually a very good point. I mean, if you take a city like Las Vegas, for example, and in Nevada, I mean that is a state, from my experience, where it had a very small labor tradition. Mm-hmm. And in the past 5 or 10 years, they've really developed it's become a very strong union city, Las Vegas has. And I know I've talked to a number of people who have felt that you could replicate some of the groundwork and grassroots organization that they did there, and you can replicate that on a national scale. So on that point, I actually can see it.
I've even seen it in the medical field where, like, nurses, in their they do shift work and that type of thing, and their hours are becoming so they have, it's a high stress job anyway. When you're taking care of sick people, you take some of that home with you. So it's a high stressful job. And then when they're understaffed and the patient per nurse ratio is lower than it is in Europe and other countries, those people are saying, they're reaching out and saying, we need some representation, because the management at these hospitals and these care facilities are just burning us with so much. They're making huge amount of profits, but it's not translating into anything that I'm seeing in my paycheck.
Well, but that, doesn't that bring the huge question of leverage, right? And maybe we could segue into a discussion of just income inequality and who really holds the economic power. At this point, what leverage do the unions have, or do even people have to even organize? Take a company like Walmart, for example. They refuse to hire unionized labor at all, and they just have they have no power to organize it at all.
Well, I don't think the change is going to come from the politicians or from the companies. They're not. They don't see. I don't see that they can see a limit to their greed. I think it's going to have to come from the people. And if you look at the labor unrest that happened in the early part of the 19th century or 20th century, you will see see that it came from the grassroots level, where people just said, you know, I want to be able to come home safely after work. And I could see this in the railroad industry with the union. It wasn't just that we got better benefits and we've got a livable wage from the company. It was a fact that, you know, we cared about the safety at work because,
it was
it was a very unforgiving.
Brought us the weekend.
Absolutely.
And that's one of those things that
healthcare benefits.
Healthcare benefits, the weekend, paid vacation.
People want that again.
I mean, if you want to work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, more power to you. That's your economic
right.
liberty. But when does economic liberty turn into economic exploitation?
Well, also on
point.
top of that, the
Good
safety
point.
factor of
Yeah.
being there at work. Are you going to come home at the end of that night with your arms and legs all still attached?
Well, what about something like card check? I mean, that's been a highly controversial piece of legislation in Congress. And Betsy Markey, for example, from this district, she supported card check and conservatives in the area have ravished her for
really
it.
come down.
They've really come down to it. I mean, where do you guys stand on something like card check?
Well, with employee free choice, it gives labor equal playing field, and they don't have that now. In Colorado, we have the Labor Peace Act that was passed after the soldiers came home from World War II, and they could see that these people had camaraderie with their fellow soldiers, and it's like, this is ingredients for organization. This is the people are working together, and here's what you have with the Labor Peace Act. It's basically the right to work in this state. So you have to get 50+1 in order to have an election. Okay, then there's a timeout period where the employer can basically harass the employees that they see as this, okay? And then you have to have another election. And you have to win that election by 75%. Take any politician, Paul Ryan, take McCain, take John Kyle, any of the people in Congress, and say, this is how you have to get elected to go represent us in Washington, and they'd go, that's crazy. That's un-American. That's undemocratic. And that's what we're up against in this state. So, employee-free choice just levels the field. People still have that choice because it actually lowers the bar. If you want to have a secret ballot, and actually it's not secret, because the two people that get to see it is the National Labor Relations Board and your employer.
Yep.
So there's no secrecy. The only people that don't see it are your fellow employees. But, so if we dispel a lot of the myths, and that type of thing about organizing and how it's all the burdens on the employee and basically intimidation is done by, it's a growth industry. At one time it was $2 billion a year to put down unions and to keep this country from organizing. So there's tons of money spent to keep people down and from organizing so they have a voice. These are just, if you want consumer confidence, you have to have good paying jobs in this country.
So people can actually consume.
Absolutely. That's what it is. If small business wants to thrive, they have to have customers, and not customers that are living on minimum wage. I hate to pick on Walmart, but it's one of their, when you hire out with Walmart, you get a job with them, when they sit you down in the room and talk about what your show or what your job's going to be, they help you apply for social programs, the social safety net. Now, do we as taxpayers want to subsidize a multinational huge company like Walmart and so that they can offer us, the taxpayers, we can offer them food stamps or some kind of subsistence? We don't need that. They need to offer this because they're making money. And it's just,
real quickly, I don't want to get too far off subject because there's another topic I want to talk about.
You bet.
Representative Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin. He has got the roadmap to America's future that is going to take care of all these issues that we've been talking about. So,
the end of that would be, we hope.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
We hope.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Ryan.
The roadmap for America's future, I give Paul Ryan props for for actually being the one Republican out there saying something other than no.
Yes.
That said, I think the roadmap in general will be a recipe for disaster. And if you want to talk about the social safety net, if you want to talk about exacerbating economic inequality, if that's what you want, go for it. That's what the roadmap will give you.
What's it going to do? Let's get into
it's going to do three things. One, it's essentially going to replace Medicare as we know it into a voucher system. It's going to
Which does what? What would that
Medicare
do?
well,
Medicare vouchers. What would that do?
basically they will first what they'll do is they'll raise the retirement age or the eligibility age from 65 to 60, I believe it's 69 and a half, and then they're going to index benefits based on need, and instead of being covered for everything, they're just going to give you a voucher every year of anywhere from $5,000 to $11,000 to pay for your medical needs. You know, with respect to Social Security, it's going to partially privatize Social Security. It's going to reduce benefits across the board, and then it's going to index those benefits to your income. So people of lower incomes is going to have a less reduction than people with higher incomes. You know, it's going to revise the tax structure. You know, from the progressive tax structure we have now to a two-tier system of 10% and 15%, and then it's going to completely abolish the corporate income tax and replace it with a very regressive consumption tax. You know, and so it purports to balance the budget by 2080. Perhaps it's going to do that, but it's also going to leave, before Social Security, 50% of the elderly population was below the poverty line. You'll probably see something close to that once it's been partially privatized and benefits have been reduced.
Well, I thought that's before Social Security and Medicare, that the elderly were one of the poorest groups.
They were. I mean, 50% live below the poverty line. And it's in part because of Social Security that, you know, they've actually been able to live a halfway decent life after retirement. Now, an interesting point here is, you know, he talks about setting up, you know, he guarantees in his plan that if you're older than the age of 55, you're not going to see your benefits cut, or you're going to have the system as you know it. But what he doesn't ever account for is the fact that, you know, right now I'm paying in, you know, to a system so that you guys can draw benefits, or people slightly older than you. And what he doesn't account for is the fact that if I start taking out some of that money, you know, there's still commitments that retirees have to you know, have fulfilled. So it's going to cost the government money. And, you know, when President Bush proposed the partial privatization plan in 2005, they said it could cost upwards of $3 trillion. You know, I mean, how's he going to pay for that?
Well, what I don't understand then is that, so we basically either they are giving us a no, or they're going to take our entitlements away.
Entitlements as we know them, I'm not confident to say they're taken away entirely, because I think that would be hyperbole. But it's definitely going to end the social safety net as we know it. It will end Medicare as we know it, and it'll end Social Security as we know it. It will still exist in one form or another, but, you know, I don't personally think it's going to be enough. Okay. You know, so.
Right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for both coming on. This was a lively debate. It was good to get a perspective from a 20-something and then from someone older. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you for coming on, gentlemen.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions or comments about today's show, please go to nocodeprogressives.com. Until next time, and remember, stay progressive.